All right, and in the bitter Washington cold, America stands at the precipice of a seismic political shift. Donald Trump, the man who rewrote political rules in his first term, prepares to reclaim the presidency with promises that send shockwaves through global capitals. The world watches with bated breath as Trump readies to unleash his particular brand of disruption across domestic and international spheres. Trump's return to power comes with bold pledges. He takes credit for the recent Israel-Hamas ceasefire and the release of hostages. But his most ambitious promise is ending the Russia-Ukraine war. Initially vowing to end it in 24 hours, Trump now suggests a realistic timeline of a few months. How will Trump achieve peace? Well, he hasn't revealed a concrete plan yet. Immigration remains a top priority. Trump plans a hardline crackdown on 11 million undocumented migrants. He considers declaring a state of emergency on the southern border to redirect defense resources for enforcement. And then the Chinese vice president is in Washington to attend the inauguration. But Beijing is buckling up. Trump threatens a 10% tariff on Chinese imports, accusing Beijing of failing to control fentanyl production. America's next-door neighbors, too, are bracing for the impact, while Mexico and Canada confront a staggering 25% levy on their exports. Trump's reasoning? Their alleged failure to stem the flow of drugs and illegal migrants into American territory. Trump has vowed to restructure government agencies and slash bureaucracy, setting up the Department of Government Efficiency with billionaire Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy at the helm. International relations are unlikely to stabilize under Trump's leadership. His focus on America First policies and territorial threats to nations like Greenland signal an era of intensified nationalism. Europe is also keenly watching the incoming president. The French Prime Minister has cautioned that France and Europe risk being dominated, crushed and marginalized if they do nothing to counter the policies put forth by Donald Trump. Pope Francis urged Trump to lead a society with no room for hatred and to promote peace and reconciliation. Pope says that Trump's plans to impose mass deportations of immigrants would be a disgrace. At 78, Trump will replace Biden as the oldest U.S. president and joins Grover Cleveland as the second leader to reclaim the presidency after losing it. His return marks a historic, contentious chapter in American politics. All right, and these are the live visuals that we're getting from the Capitol Rotunda right now. We were seeing earlier how Trump was en route to the Capitol Hill. He is here now. This is the Capitol Rotunda. This is where Trump will be delivering his inauguration address as well. For more on this, we're now being joined by our correspondent Susan Teherani, who is in New York. Susan, we can already see everyone's gathered in the Capitol Rotunda. I know a lot of the supporters were really disappointed that the venue had to be shifted indoors. Susan, I'm sure you've been talking to people through the course of the day as well and in the lead up to the ceremony. What are we hoping for?
Well, this is a very important day because of the way that the president-elect and the incoming president got elected. He really literally, figuratively won a landslide. So he does have a mission, and the promises that he made, I think the American public are going to be looking forward to and seeing, how much of it can get done as soon as possible. He's making campaign promises. On the one hand, it's one thing, but then going into office and trying to execute those, of course, is another. Nonetheless, we are expected to hear from the incoming president, Donald Trump. He's going to talk about the revolution of common sense, in his own words, from what we have seen. And he wants to talk about unity. He wants to talk about strength. But he also wants to talk about the way forward for the country that's going to be very different from what we saw in the last 4 years with the Biden presidency. Here in New York, because of the cold weather, there aren't many people outside. There aren't anyone out and about to that extent, and those that wanted to run to Washington, D.C. to be part of this historic event. But nonetheless, New Yorkers are also, on the one hand, looking forward to his border policies because New York really has been a hub for these illegal migrants and migrant crime. But then there are those that are concerned that they might go too far and, there may be immigrants that will be impacted where they're not really, part of that sort of deportation process, and it might just cause, more harm than good. So this is where we are right now. We'll have to wait and see how much of this can be executed on the part of the president, but we do know that he's expected to sign those executive orders. And, we talked about the border issue, we talked about energy. I did also want to say that he promised to sort of restore TikTok. He can't do that with an executive order. While he might say that, he's going to be working on it, he will have to sort of sign that into law. So the TikTok ban and the executive order, where, these two have sort of been aligned with one another, he can't do anything about that. That is going to wait. And it'll be interesting to see whether or not he's going to use TikTok as a soft power tool with Xi Jinping moving forward. So those are some things to look out for as well.
Right, Susan, absolutely. Now, Trump has pledged to end many of outgoing President Joe Biden's initiatives, especially the renewable energy initiative, including those passed by Congress in the landmark Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. Now, that will be something to watch out for as well. What has been the response for that?
Yeah, I mean, Trump's energy policy, drill, baby, drill, that was a huge campaign promise on the part of the incoming president, and that was something that a lot of those battleground states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, these are oil and gas workers that were very concerned about Joe Biden's energy policy. A lot of them were working on this pipeline called the Keystone Pipeline. Actually, President Biden signed an executive order to halt the Keystone Pipeline. It was a transfer of energy pipeline, and a lot of people lost their jobs because of that. So, that was one of the points that was important for these voters in those states because it would create the economy, because of the jobs, and also because, energy independence is such an important issue for many Americans. So, the energy policy, he's expected to talk about a state of emergency when it comes to the energy issue as well.
Right, Susan, of course, we're getting live visuals from the Capitol Rotunda. Just a few minutes ago, we also saw Elon Musk there. That's something I wanted to discuss with you as well. Susan, how are people reacting to the role that Elon Musk will be playing in the incoming administration? We know, of course, that he will be playing quite a significant role this time around. How is that being received?
Well, on two fronts. On the one hand, there are those that are concerned about Elon Musk's role in government, but there's something that everyone can agree on, and that's overspending in government. And he's expected to take over DOGE, that sort of non-governmental organization, possibly with Vivek Ramaswamy, and they want to cut, spending in government. That is the bipartisan issue. Everyone knows that there's extra spending, and these spending needs to be halted. There's an issue about how involved Elon Musk is going to be in, the White House and American politics. On the one hand, once again, people are very happy because, he's almost a genius, really, in many ways, and people want that. But on the other hand, there are those that are concerned that, it's just someone like Elon Musk and his ideals, where they just don't align with a lot of the ideals of the Democratic Party. So a mixed bag, but nonetheless, it'll be President Trump's prerogative to see, how far Elon Musk can really be involved in the White House and how much of it is going to be only regarding that organization, DOGE.
Right. Now, we're getting these live visuals. The Clintons have arrived in the Capitol Rotunda as well. And now, Susan, just coming back to the point that you were making earlier, and this is something, in fact, that we've discussed a few minutes ago. We also saw Jeff Bezos there, and if I'm not mistaken, Mark Zuckerberg is there as well. That being said, we heard in Biden's farewell speech how he mentioned the tech-industrial complex. He warned of that as well. Now, Susan, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, that was very bizarre, considering the fact that, on the one hand, they weren't the tech-industrial complex when Meta was collaborating with the Biden administration to suppress stories on COVID. on his son Hunter Biden's laptop story. These are words of Mark Zuckerberg. They said that the Biden administration was very involved, notably in silencing Donald Trump. Remember, Donald Trump's accounts were all closed not only on Meta platforms, but on what was X now, what was Twitter before. So they were recognized, but it's interesting now that there's been this change of heart on the part of Zuckerberg, and Twitter has been sold to Elon Musk. All of a sudden, you know, they're the bad guys, and they become this tech-industrial complex. It's very bizarre because he was sort of aligning it with a military-industrial complex that many are critical about. Many thought that was taking it a step too far. And also because he talks about oligarchy as well in his farewell speech. And again, he was alluding to perhaps Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. And a few days before that, he gave someone like George Soros, who has invested so much in American politics, the Medal of Honor. So, you know, once again, there's a sort of this discrepancy between his words and what his own administration had done, and I think that was pretty clear for many Americans.
All right, Susan. Well, of course, people are pouring into the Capitol Rotunda. We will be tracking all the live developments on that. Thank you so much for joining us for now with the latest on this. We'll continue to monitor this closely. All right, and these are the live visuals that we're getting from the Capitol Rotunda, where Donald Trump is all set to be sworn in a few minutes from now. We've been getting you the live visuals. A few minutes ago, we saw the Clintons arrive as well. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg are in attendance. Now, what happens in the first 24 hours of Trump in office, that is something that remains to be seen. Now, he will be inaugurated as the 47th President of the United States of America, only the second to be elected to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. Now, Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance will take oath of office in the Capitol Rotunda. Now, within hours of taking office, Trump is expected to sign dozens of presidential executive actions as well, including one to formally. Now, there is a lot that he's pledged. In fact, he's going to be ending many of outgoing President Joe Biden's renewable energy initiatives. Now, it really remains to be seen how much of it is logistically possible. He has made some really bold campaign promises. The time is to act. Whether he will be able to deliver on all of them, that is, of course, something that remains to be seen as well. Digital currencies will be looking, of course, for day one actions from Trump as well. If I can just get you a brief overview of the schedule, it will start with the opening invocation by Senator Amy Klobuchar. Will call the ceremony to order. Timothy Cardinal Dolan and revered Franklin Graham will deliver the invocation. And opera singer Christopher Macchio will perform O America. This will be followed by a vice presidential oath. Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh will administer the oath of office to Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. Carrie Underwood, accompanied by Armed Forces Chorus and the U.S. Naval Academy Glee Club, will perform America the Beautiful. These are as per reports. That will then be followed by the presidential oath and, of course, the much-anticipated address. Chief Justice John Roberts will administer the presidential oath of office to Donald Trump. The Glee Club will also present the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Following the swearing-in, Trump will deliver his inaugural address as the 47th President of the United States. This will then be followed by a benediction that will be given by a group of religious leaders, including Rabbi Dr. Ari Berman, Imam Husham Al-Husseini, and Pastor Lorenzo Sewell. This event will then conclude with the national anthem performed by Christopher Macchio. As you can see, these are the live visuals that we're getting right now from the Capitol Rotunda. Trump is expected to sign about 200 executive orders. That has been a topic of much discussion It remains to be seen what these will be. It remains to be seen whether he will be announcing these live or not. The first 24 hours are going to be very crucial and will set the tone for his Make America Great agenda for the next 4 years. Vice President-elect J.D. Vance will take the oath of office first, followed by President-elect Donald Trump. Now, ahead of Trump's swearing in fact, Pope Francis had offered prayers, and in a message to Trump ahead of the inauguration, the Pope said that he hopes that the United States will build a society, and I'm quoting here, where there is no room for hatred, discrimination, or exclusion. Now, from what we know from Trump's past speeches, he's vowed to repeal swathes of Biden-era legislation within hours of taking office. He's expected to sign over 200 executive orders within the first few days in office. The most important being immigration. Trump has put illegal immigration front and center of his agenda. He's expected to unleash a dramatic shift in that regard as well. So America is really in for a seismic political shift. His other decisions, from what we do know as per reports from now, could involve removing regulations on oil drilling, pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement, and axing the $7,500 tax credit that made electric vehicles more affordable. All right, now we have Susan Teherani on the phone line with us. Susan, as I mentioned here, his other decisions could involve removing regulations on oil drilling, pulling out of the climate agreement. What can you tell us about that, Susan?
So Donald Trump has been clear about how countries themselves that are involved in these kind of agreements aren't paying their fair share. And so, as with NATO during the first Trump administration, where he encouraged NATO member states to raise their spending, it's probably going to be the same here as well. Whether or not he'll completely pull out is yet to be seen, but he's very adamant in other countries, aside from the United States, paying their fair share when it comes to these multilateral organizations. But nonetheless, it's clear that the Trump administration 2.0 is going to be a lot more isolationist than what we saw with the Biden administration, and being part of these different organizations, whether they're related to the World Bank or the UN or whatnot. And, Donald Trump is someone that, if his first term is any indication, prefers to deal with countries one-on-one, prefers to deal with world leaders one-on-one. And he's not really a fan of these multilateral settings. So that's not surprising. And then when it comes to the issue of climate change, he has been pretty vocal about how he wants the United States to return to fossil fuel, and that the world can't afford that right now. And while he hasn't really talked about global warming to that extent, we know that his policies are really going to, they're not going to center around climate.
Right. Of course, from what we do know, as per the schedule, it will be Senator Amy Klobuchar who will be calling on the ceremony to order. In fact, earlier she said the inaugural luncheon is a time when members from both sides of the aisle come together in recognition of our democracy and the peaceful transfer of power. And I'm looking forward to continuing this time-honored tradition today. Of course, it remains to be seen how that pans out. What are we really expecting from the inauguration address, and how do you think this time will be different from Trump's first term in office?
So we have heard about what he's expected to talk about. It's going to be very different, of course, than his first term. He's a lot more comfortable now assuming this office of presidency. It's not going to be very confrontational. He wants to talk about peace and strength, of course. He wants to talk about unity. He really says that he wants to bring the country together. And what was an interesting quote that he is going to talk about is the revolution of common sense. So basically bringing common sense back to the forefront. We are also expected to, see this event being indoor. So it's going to be a lot more muted and subdued. than if it was outdoor with so many people on the lawn watching. And the guest list has, of course, been cut down significantly. So it's going to be a lot smaller, but nonetheless, it's supposed to be something that is non-partisan. It's going to be a transfer piece of power. But it'll be also interesting that it may be the first time that we're going to see foreign leaders, like Javier Milei, also attend this ceremony. Nonetheless, we talked about those tech entrepreneurs and leaders. Of course, they'll be sitting alongside congressmen and senators, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, Sam Altman of OpenAI, Mark Zuckerberg of Meta, and of course Elon Musk is going to be there as well. So it's going to be a very interesting crowd. There will be celebrities as well, Sylvester Stallone, Mel Gibson, John Doe, but also, just seeing the Democrats and Republicans come together will be interesting in a smaller setting.
Right, Susan. Now, of course, another thing that I want to discuss with you was international relations under Trump 2.0. We know the Chinese vice president is in Washington to attend the inauguration as well, but we do know that Beijing is buckling up. It is preparing for proposed 10% tariff on Chinese imports, which Trump will be imposing, accusing Beijing of failing to control fentanyl production. That being said, how do you see the ties between the two evolving?
A lot of America's China policy has been consistent, even during the Biden administration. Although many criticized Biden for being too soft on China, notably when it came to COVID and trying to find the root causes of that virus with Xi Jinping. But Biden also kept a lot of the tariffs that Trump had imposed during his first administration. It'll be interesting to see how Trump wants to work with China. We talked about the tariffs that you just mentioned, but also he's been having conversations with Xi Jinping, not only regarding TikTok, but also, the issues in the Indo-Pacific. And something that is going to be very interesting to watch is the issue of Taiwan, where the Trump administration is going to stand, because we know that China has ambitions to move on Taiwan. To what extent will the Trump administration 2.0 be willing to, get involved in something like that? In terms of trade, it's going to be, again, very interesting to see how the United States wants to maneuver these tariffs, be hard on China, but on the other hand, also not increase prices for Americans here at home as well. I mean, the Chinese market, of course, is vast here in the United States. And also, it'll be interesting to see whether or not diplomatically how these two governments are going to be able to interact with one another.
For latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.